Call the Planning Commission meeting to order. We have a few people this evening, so what I say before every meeting may actually be relevant this evening. If you have not appeared before the Planning Commission, that's what I would like to call to your attention. There are little cards in the row ahead of you. And if you want to speak on a particular item or in a public comment, which is one of the very first things, if you would please fill out a card and give it to the clerk, we'll be sure to call you. The procedure here is that public comment, which is not on any item on our agenda, is up to 3 minutes. Once we get into agenda items, the applicant has up to 5 minutes. Then people who are speaking who are not the applicant have up to 3 minutes each. And then the applicant concludes with up to 3 minutes. The matter is then, the public hearing is closed, and the Planning Commission then discusses it, and in the normal course will make a motion. I'd also like to remind you that sometimes this is confusing. We are the Planning Commission, which means we're a non-elective body. We are appointed by the Town Council. So the Town Council, among other entities, basically sets the laws and the procedures, and our job is to receive the facts and try to understand the facts and apply those facts to the law as it has been given to us. I say that to you because sometimes people, when they make an argument to us, forget our limitations, and other people never forget our limitations. So I just call that to your attention. And then the final thing I would like to say is if you have anything that makes noise, like a cell phone or a pager or whatever, if you put it on silent, that would be greatly appreciated. Okay, that having been said, I'd like to ask for the roll call.
Commissioner Erickson?
Here.
Commissioner Jensen? Here. Commissioner Sayoc?
Here.
Commissioner Machichis? Absent. Commissioner Talasfor?
Here.
Commissioner Bourgeois?
Here.
And Chair O'Donnell.
Here. If you'd all join me, we will say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The next matter we have is the approval of the minutes of October the 28th. May I have a motion or some discussion?
And I will not be voting on that, Chair, since I wasn't here.
All right, let me say this. If you were to look at those minutes, we had this discussion last time too. The town attorney who is here and can correct me if I'm wrong, has advised me, which is something I didn't know, that you don't have to be present to vote on the minutes, because what you're really doing is you're going over the minutes, and if you, for one reason or another, don't approve of it, you can vote that way. If, on the other hand, you have no objection to it, you can vote in favor of it. Although we said the same thing last week, Commissioner Bourgeois nevertheless elected not to vote, so it's up to you, your call.
I will elect not to vote.
Okay. I'm not persuading anybody, and I blame that on the town attorney. May I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you.
I make a motion to approve the minutes of Wednesday, October 28, 2009.
Second.
All right. There's a motion and second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? And there's one abstention, and Commissioner Machichi is not present. Okay. Do we have any written communications? We have one desk item on item number 1, 50 University Avenue. Anything else?
No.
Okay. We apparently have no requested continuances. And how about subcommittee reports? Yes, Commissioner Erickson.
Thank you, Chair O'Donnell. The Historic Preservation Committee met this afternoon right here in the chambers and took action to remove the property at 1661 Ferris Avenue from the Historic Resources Inventory. Also took action to recommend approving some repairs on a property at 322 University Avenue, and also considered for future or discussed future consideration of a potential amendment to a overlay zone, LHP overlay zone, that relates to gravel driveways, which are not permitted under the town code at this point in time. So there's a particular property that needs to have that change, have an amendment to the zone on Shannon Road.
All right. Any other subcommittee reports? All right. Seeing none, this is the time now for what we call verbal communications. And again, that's if somebody has something to say that they think relates to what we do or otherwise, they can do it now. I've received no cards on that. So unless somebody corrects me now, we will go on from the verbal communications and go on to the consent calendar. This evening we have 4 matters on the consent calendar. I've received no requests to take anything off the consent calendar, and therefore I would request a motion. Commissioner Bourgeois?
I move to approve the consent calendar.
And do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, Commissioner Tellis for. Any discussion? Yes. Commissioner
Commissioner
Jensen?
Bourgeois, I take it that your motion includes all of the various findings and conditions that are contained in each of the items in our reports?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So, except for the absence of Commissioner Machici, it's unanimous. So that gets us to the one remaining public hearing, and that relates to 517 and 615 Blossom Hill Road and Placer Oaks Road. And so I'd ask for a staff report.
Thank you, Chairman O'Donnell and members of the Commission. On September 23rd, the Planning Commission considered these applications. The Commission continued the matter with the following directions. That the road be relocated, that architectural diversity be provided, look at traffic calming measures, provide a photo simulation of the sound wall, and provide an alternative with the BMP unit constructed on the site. The road has been realigned at the Placer Oaks Road frontage, and this has resulted in a removal of an oak tree. As for architectural diversity, the applicant is requesting that this matter be referred to the architecture and site application process due to the uncertainty of which alternative will be recommended. Plan development applications only require conceptual elevation, so this request is consistent with town code. In terms of traffic calming measures, the town has worked with the Placer Oaks neighborhood in 2004 regarding implementing some measures. The report that you received identifies what traffic calming measures have already been implemented. However, the applicant has stated that as a community benefit, they are willing to contribute $15,000 for studying additional traffic calming measures. For the sound wall, the applicant has commented that he will provide that information at the hearing tonight. They have, however, revised the sound wall to step it at various points to break up the continuous wall, as was suggested at the last meeting. As for the BMP unit, the applicant has provided 2 alternative plans to add a unit, which will increase the development to 10 units. The first alternative is called Alternative A, and you've received that plan in your packet. It has lots ranging in size from 5,214 to 19,444 square feet. The house sizes will range from 980 to 3,135 square feet. Staff does not recommend this alternative due to the location of the BMP unit, which is sited facing the terminus of the proposed roadway. Staff is concerned that the BMP unit would be impacted by headlights and by vehicles parking directly in front of the unit. Based on staff's concern, the applicant has recently submitted another alternative called Alternative B. Staff prefers this alternative over the other alternative in that the BMP unit is more incorporated within the development, and the driveway to the garage is located from the easement that belongs to West Valley Sanitation District. The submittal for this alternative is not complete, and additional information and plans are required if the Commission determines that this alternative should be pursued. The Commission has several alternatives that they could take tonight in taking an action on this matter. If they determine that the original 9-lot application is the best option, the report notes the actions that should be taken. If the Commission determines that the 10-lot proposal is the best option, The commission should determine which 10-lot alternative has merit. They should then continue the matter to the meeting of January 13th to allow staff time to review the plans and to develop a plan development ordinance which is applicable to the alternative that you have chosen. The commission should also direct the applicant to finalize the plans and provide the written documentation that was requested in the report, which is from the West Valley Sanitation District and the noise consultant. And that concludes staff's presentation.
Are there questions of staff? Commissioner Jensen?
I actually have two questions for Ms. Bailey and one question for Mr. Korb.
Why?
Okay. So my first question to Ms. Bailey is, what does $15,000 buy for as a traffic calming measure? Does it, I imagine that it doesn't even buy a speed bump. I mean, can you even equate what that would
I can
mean?
attempt that, and John can go. Oh, he's going to go into it.
Yeah, depending on a speed bump may cost in the neighborhood of $2,000 or $3,000. So yeah, 15,000 may be able to get you a traffic circle, something like that.
Okay. Now I'm totally forgetting the second question, so I'll go to Mr. Corbin. Do we have to make any findings? I've never encountered the situation where we're being asked to rescind an ordinance, essentially a plan development ordinance. Do we have to make any findings that there was some error in the original one, or do we have free rein to just simply rescind it?
You have free rein. It's a legislative decision.
Okay. And if I could remember my second question from Ms. Bailey, I would ask it.
It will come to you, and just let us know, then you can ask it. Commissioner Bourgeois?
I have two questions for Ms. Bailey. First, about the A&S process. I guess I'm just a little concerned about if we approved a PD, be it a 9-lot or a 10-lot, and we're clearly not satisfied with the architecture, it coming back to us and not going as far as we want it to go. And we've had this in the past where we've had potentially not provided enough direction at the A&S level, at the PD level, and it comes back to us on A&S, and we get the comment, well, it's consistent with the PD. And so I'm curious how that process is going to work, and if it's clear to staff and the applicant that we really weren't happy with the architectural diversity.
Since if it was continued with having the A&S be required to come back, that it would be totally open, and we could write a condition. I think we have a condition, but if you want to emphasize in more detail that, because it's very clear that you had some directions for diversity, and if you have more directions on what type of diversity, again, it depends which alternative you pick, because there was the possibility of that historic house potentially being located to the site, which would really change the direction on what the architecture would be.
And is that one of the reasons why they didn't want to pursue that at this time? They wanted big picture direction before they. Mm-hmm. But we do have, architectural design consistent with what we've received in other PDs, and then we get to A&S, and they're very, very close. So I just wanted to make sure that
we can define that
our
condition
are
to make it more specific, so it allows more interpretation on what the final architecture will be.
Great. And then my second concern was, it seemed in both of the 10-lot subdivisions, both of them resulted in a flag lot. Has there been, first of all, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So has there been, maybe it's too early in that process, but do you see a way of avoiding that with a 10-lot subdivision, or maybe that's a question for the applicant?
That would be more of a question for an applicant. You can always reduce the house size and the footprint of the house and make the lots bigger. Rearrange the lot sizes to, if the house size, if the footprint is reduced, there's a potential to change the lot
size and
dimensions.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes, there are more questions. Commissioner Jensen, you thought of your question?
I remembered it.
Okay.
As I read the staff report, it was my understanding, and I'd like to see if I'm right or wrong on this, that we actually couldn't consider what house, that is the historic Fiesta Way house, in connection with this application, that we couldn't make any kind of assumption or consideration for choosing something with this application as it relates to thinking that Fiesta Way house might go here. Is that right?
That's correct. It's unsure. First of all, the library project hasn't been acted on yet. And assuming it is approved, then there's the question of where is the house going to be relocated.
Before I get to Commissioner Sayak, I want to get to Commissioner Erickson, because prior to the meeting, he mentioned a similar concern, and I had suggested he wait before raising that, but since it's now come up, no, I mean, there was nothing wrong with raising it now, but I want to give Commissioner Erickson an opportunity now to raise, if he wants to augment that or say something else.
Thank you, Chair O'Donnell. It seems to me that whether or not a historic house or any other house might be relocated to one of the potential properties of the planned development is not something that is a consideration that we could, if I would understand it, not something that a consideration we can take in approving the PD. So I guess it seems to me wasn't necessarily even appropriate to be in the staff report. I mean, while it might be a good idea, ultimately, but it doesn't make it was even appropriate to be a part of the staff report, because it's not, I don't believe that's something that we could take into consideration in approving the PD.
Well, I take it also, since there's nothing that assure us that it would happen anyway, that it's a double barrel thing. You're saying conceptually it's probably not, it's a red herring. But secondly, even if we did take into consideration, there's no way to make sure it occurs. So there's a double there. But you'd get to the first issue, and that is it shouldn't be there, right? Okay, and that's Commissioner Erickson's view on that. Commissioner Sayak, you wanted to say something.
Yes, I had two questions, but actually the first has now been answered with regard to all the questions asked. But a follow-up to the traffic calming and the performance standard that we have, it does require that there's either a neighborhood petition or criteria that meets our traffic calming policy for the neighborhood to meet before that $15,000 could be allocated to that immediate neighborhood. Could you just briefly explain what the criteria would be, since there was numerous concerns about that by the residing neighbors?
Yeah. Yes, there are requirements for the community to get together. One of the biggest problems with traffic calming is getting everybody to agree on a solution and agree that there is an issue. A lot of times there are people who are concerned about traffic in their neighborhood, but maybe the majority of the neighborhood is not. So there's a petition that is required, and I believe the petition is over 50% of the households in the neighborhood must sign. And then there's data collection that goes on, and there are a few triggers, so that, to be specific, the 85th percentile speeds exceeding the posted speed limit by 5 miles per hour, volumes exceeding 1,500 vehicles per day, volume of trucks over 30 feet in length, and curb parking occupancy exceeding 70% from 8 to 7. So there's a number of things that could trigger, but one of those has to be triggered for the traffic calming process to continue.
Follow-up.
Yes, please.
So if I understand it correctly, the criteria plus the neighborhood petition then?
Correct.
And how do you define the immediate neighborhood? Since we did have neighbors as far as the street across from Los Gatos Boulevard that is across from Los Gatos Almaden. I believe a lot of people cut through that to get into that neighborhood also.
It's probably not an easily answered question at a meeting like this, but it does take into account cut-through traffic, things like that, and so there's an analysis done to figure out exactly if you were to implement some type of traffic calming in a certain location, is that going to push out to other neighboring community or neighboring neighborhoods.
Okay.
So
thank
that's
you.
kind of how it's working.
Any other questions? Yes. Commissioner Jensen.
You can tell me, someone could tell me if this is inappropriate, but is there such a thing as anticipatory traffic calming? If you're bringing a development in which theoretically is going to bring more cars and is going to do whatever, and you know that by reason of the development there's going to be an impact on traffic, do you have to go and wait for that to happen, or can you ask for the traffic calming as part of the development?
Before Mr. Gaylord responds, I might just say that typically when one has traffic studies, it is in anticipation of a problem, and therefore when you address it, which you often do, it is not based on traffic counts, but it is based upon various methods that Mr. Gaylord can tell us, but it is not uncustomary that you try to anticipate a problem and solve it before it occurs. Is that correct?
That's correct. Project is looked at with ITE, Institute of Transportation Engineer numbers calculated based on what that project would contribute to the area that is added on to the local existing traffic.
And I agree with that, and I'm sorry to be needlessly argumentative, but you could never have 85% of people agree on what the solution that's going to be and petition before it actually occurs. So it seems like a chicken and egg problem where the development comes and creates a problem that everyone can anticipate, but you can't fix it until it occurs and people have a petition and 85% of them agree on what the solution is.
Why don't we find out whether it's ever happened before, and that might answer the question. Has it happened before? A petition was gathered and some redress was obtained?
It's 50%, and typically this is for existing communities that feel that there's issues within the traffic in their area. Projects that come in are required to do traffic studies, and if the studies show that there would be increased traffic and it would trigger issues, then that's part of the mitigation of the project. This project does not trigger those. It is not likely from a perception standpoint even to increase traffic. That's what the studies have shown. However, there has been discussion that traffic calming would be possibly desired from the neighborhood. So, and the applicant has offered to contribute funds to that. So this is a method to take care of that. So as far as the 50 percentile, the 50 percentile would be the existing community without the 10 residences.
Okay.
We'll get two bites at the apple, I think. This evening, for example, we could say implement some traffic calming, and then subsequent, if it turns out that it didn't work to the neighbor's satisfaction, they could do the petition. Okay, I want to take one item that I would like to bring now, and that is, I have a card here on agenda item 3, which was a consent item. Hopefully, when the party here, Jackie Wilson, saw the disposition, it is no longer before us. So I didn't want you sitting there all night waiting for.
That's very kind of you.
All right, thank you.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I just want to go back to the issue of the BMP unit and the possible historic structure that could go in there. I think you're all absolutely correct because of the timing of the project. The structure is not technically available to be removed to that location. There's no way, thus, in the PD to guarantee that historic structure going there. So it is not technically relevant in your consideration. It would be relevant at the A&S level. Hopefully at that point we'll know more about the structure. And we're not talking about the library project here tonight. We're talking about a completely separate project. But I do want to emphasize, at the very least, for purposes of clarification for other staff members who are dealing with this issue and dealing with the library project specifically, that the preservation of that historic structure is an important component of the library project. It's an important component of the environmental analysis of the potential impacts associated with that project. It will be an important issue for the town. Relocation of that unit to a suitable location will be an important issue. It's not an issue here today. And it's certainly not a red herring with regard to the town. It will be an important issue for the town at a later date. I think you can consider that information informative, but not necessarily necessary for your decision tonight.
All right, we won't debate that point. I think we're set now to go with the applicant, and so Roger Griffin, please identify yourself and tell us.
Good evening, Chair and members of the Planning Commission. I'm Roger Griffin of Paragon Design Group here in Los Gatos, and I'm presenting on behalf of our client, Cupertino Development Corporation. Here tonight, in addition to our client, is Keith Coker from Cupertino Development, and we have other members of our team, Paul Reed, landscape architect, and Jeff Pack, our acoustical consultant, is also here. When we last reviewed this property on September 23rd, your direction to us was to realign the entry roadway to reduce headlight glare at exit, 2, to provide architectural diversity, 3, to look at traffic calming measures, 4, to provide photo simulation of the sound wall, and number 5, provide an alternative site with BMP units inclusive. It's appropriate to begin our discussion tonight with the last direction. During discussion with staff to comply and meet the requests that you made of us, we discussed several options, and during that discussion, the historic Fiesta home was brought up that it needed to be moved to accommodate a future library site. We looked at how we could accommodate the home on our site and provide both a BMP unit and also to remove one impediment to building the new library. We have had a house moving firm look at the home and the possible route to move it, and they have assured us that the house can be moved to our site. We have prepared 2 alternative sites of 10 lots each. And alternate A has the BMP or the possible Fiesta home, or it could be another home. Staff has accommodated in the staff report that if we do not move the Fiesta home, that it could be a 2-story home, a BMP that would be placed in there that would be commensurate with the other homes. The site is at the end of the private roadway for a with a one-car garage behind it, and since the architecture of the Fiesta home is of a historic Italian style, we are proposing a companion market rate home of a Victorian style of an overlapping time frame. This home is smaller than the rest of our homes. Yes.
Let me stop you for a second. I believe that we've just been informed, and I believe the commission probably agrees, that the Fiesta home is not really before us. You can talk about it if you want to, because
I understand that.
It is important. So I'm just saying that because there are other things we're interested in. You're running your own talk. Do it any way you want to. But if that's helpful to you, I just suggest it to you.
All right. If perchance that we were to put in that home that is of a Victorian or an early mid-18th, 19th century home, that it's smaller, and also we have designed another smaller home that would be of kind of a transitional nature to the BMP unit of 9, that's basically just under 1,000 square feet. Under alternative B, we have provided the BMP home has been moved away from the sound wall and has an attached 1-car garage. The market rate home is moved to the end of the private roadway. And now back to direction number 1. The access roadway on all 3 sites has been realigned to direct the headlights away from our neighbors across the street. Mitigation planning will be provided to compensate for the removal of the oak tree at the curb. This access at Placer Oaks is our only legal access. The roadway follows an existing roadbed that has served many years as the only access to this site. We have no other available options for accessing this site. Architectural diversity is provided by 3 different styles of architecture spanning the years from 1840 to 1930. An ANS review will be brought back to you for your decisions after any PD that is approved. We have spoken with the town's traffic engineer, and there are no specific traffic calming measures scheduled for our immediate neighborhood. However, there are a couple of others that are on the list, and one of them, the first one that's next on the list, is $15,000, and that's how we arrived at that number. And it would complete all the work. I think it's Del Val, if I'm not mistaken, areas that's on the list if it's not used in the immediate area. If it's used elsewhere. We have prepared two simulations of the sound wall. This first simulation is a view at the time of planting. The sound wall as viewed from the freeway side, this is with an eye level of 6 feet above the freeway. And the first view is at the time of planting, the wall is barely visible through the existing vegetation. That's the vegetation now existing. In addition, we have staggered the wall with offsets visible from both sides. The sound wall looks to be of wood-grained lap siding and will be stained tan or brown to blend with the new planting. The location of the sound wall was a requirement of the town council during our processing of the apartments, and the intention was to provide planting on our property and on the freeway side of the sound wall. The planting would have time to mature in the event that the state...
Let me stop you a minute. Normally, I would tell you, your time is up, but since we all need to know this about that sound wall, just assume we've asked you a question about the sound wall and tell us more.
Can't believe it's 5 minutes.
And you're having fun.
Okay, I apologize for that, and thank you for allowing me to go over. At that time, that the town council was concerned about the possible removal of all of the vegetation that is along the freeway and currently blocks vision to the site. The planting that we put in would have time to mature in the event that the state were to widen or otherwise eliminate some of the existing planting that now obscures a view of this property from the freeway. The second view represents growth at 10 years. And this is the height of the new planting on our side of the property line, which means that we have control over the maintenance of that plant landscaping. It's not on the state property. The evergreen trees that we plant now will be peaking above the freeway vegetation, and should that be reduced, the planting that we put in now will be obscuring the view of both the sound wall and the site. This streetscape here illustrates the planting obscuring the sound wall, and the homes are barely visible. The top of the wall is at 319 feet and is approximately 9 foot above the freeway. The second-story floors are between 6 inches below the top of the wall and a maximum of 18 inches above the sound wall. In summary, we have responded in a very positive way to your direction of the 23rd. We've included within the project a BMP. We have accommodated a community need by possibly moving the historic home and freeing up the town library site if that is deemed necessary. We have directed the headlight glare away from our neighbor's home, provided $15,000 for neighborhood traffic calming, and established architectural diversity, which we will amplify at the time of the ANS. And the sound wall is offset at intervals for variety. We believe that this project, as proposed, is a proper size project and one that is entirely compatible with the existing neighborhood of single-family homes. We respectfully request that you select one of the options presented tonight or select the original Nime-home site and make a positive recommendation to the town council. I thank you, and our team and myself are available for questions that you might have.
I'm sure there'll be a few questions here. Commissioner Telesford.
Would you please put the simulation of the sound wall back up, please?
Yes. This is at 10 years.
Let her ask the question.
Okay. My question is, where am I standing?
This is standing on the freeway.
I'm standing on the freeway looking directly
High level, looking directly at the site.
at the site. So what would I see if I was coming into town or leaving town, either south or north?
Basically, there's greater vegetation at the far end, at the Campbell end of the site. Let's say, if you were coming from Campbell or from 85, there's heavier vegetation at that end. There's a little lighter vegetation in the middle, and then there is more at the end. So that it basically would be the same view all along. It would be vegetation. The wall will be obscured almost in its entirety.
And you're adding a lot of vegetation, you're planting?
Right. We're putting a screen of planting evergreens and some deciduous trees, mostly evergreens, that will be on our property, behind the property line and between the wall, so that berm is planted with trees that we have control over. The association would be able to maintain those trees. They're not in the state right-of-way and cannot be removed by the state.
And is that one stretch, you said 300 and how many feet of sound wall?
There's approximately 300 feet of sound wall.
Okay, and is that at one level? Are you planning on varying that level?
Well, the freeway, it's prescribed as a level above the center line of the freeway, which is the sound source the source of the sound. And we adopted 319, but the freeway does drop as you go towards Blossom Hill. So as you come from 85 towards Blossom Hill, there's about a 1.5 foot drop in the freeway in that time, in that location, and the wall will drop with that.
And so it'll appear, if you could see it, as
Essentially
one-
on a fairly constant
And then,
height.
all right, then when you go back to the simulation with the houses on the sound wall? May I have one more question?
Sure.
Can you please repeat to me, because I missed
I
it.
was speaking
But would you, yeah, I was speaking very quickly. Would you repeat to me the heights that you were saying the sound wall would be this high and the houses would be?
This being the wall height, as it moves along here, that wall height is nominally at, let's say, 319 feet. The floor line of the home...
No, you don't mean that. The wall height is at 319 feet?
319 is the elevation in relationship to the freeway, which is plus 9 feet
Okay.
above the freeway. So the wall is 9 feet above the freeway in a constant fashion. The floor line of the homes on our side, the new homes, vary from at the one end, it's 6 inches. The second floor line is 6 inches below the top of the wall. To the other, to the midpoint, it's up at 18 inches maximum above the wall height for the second floor.
Commissioner Jensen?
I'd just like to ask a follow-up to Commissioner Talascore's question, then I have another question. I think perhaps what Commissioner Talascore is getting at is from the bottom of the wall to the top of the wall, how high is it? It's not 319 feet.
No, I apologize. That is the above sea level. It's 390
Right, so how tall is the wall?
It is 9 feet above the center line of the freeway. And
The bricks that make the
from
wall, how
okay.
tall are they?
The wall itself varies from 9 to 12 feet on top of a berm, and then there is a small retaining wall on some of the, quite a bit of the wall to create the berm that's at the property line itself, but that'll be down at the bottom, and it varies from about 2 foot to 4 feet in height. Then there's a berm, and the wall is set back, and then there's the other wall on top. But keep in mind that the freeway at our property line is significantly below the freeway, so that what we try to do is to show the slope down from the freeway to our property line. So there is quite a swale along the side of the freeway there.
And I have a different question.
Yes.
Mr. Griffin, referring to page A3, sheet A3, on the plans that we got in our report, they are elevations of models A and B of the
Okay.
houses. As I understand it, if we approved a 9-home subdivision, all of the houses would be models A and B, is that correct?
We've established...
Yes or no? Would they all be A and B?
No, there are actually 4 different plans on, if you approve
Am
the
I
original
missing-
9 lot, that's true.
Okay, that's what I asked. The 9 lots. If it's 9 houses, they're all A and B, is that correct? If there's a BMP unit that happens to be a relocated historic home, then there would be 10 houses, and 2 of them would be Victorian, and the rest would be what we see on sheets A and 3. I mean,
think
sheet
you'd be
A3.
looking for some direction at that point.
Okay,
as to
but that's the preliminary concept, is that correct?
correct.
So I'm confused about where the architectural diversity is then.
Well, in the sense that it covers the years, the architectural style of the Italian is from about 1840 to 1880. Then from the early mid-1800s to the 1900 is the Victorian style of the home, and then the eclectic Spanish runs up into the 30s.
Okay, thank you.
Let me follow up on that question for a moment, because I'm not sure I think I understood the question. I'm not sure I understood the answer. If we threw out alternative A and alternative B and went back to the 9-lot subdivision, would we have it is your proposal to have two different models?
Yes, we have two homes, two
And
home designs.
only two models?
Yes.
Okay. So the only way you get more than two is if you, one, put in a 10-lot subdivision, essentially, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the Planning Commission, when we asked you for more diversity, is it your intention to say, well, we'll deal with more diversity when we come to architectural site approval?
Well, you would be the approving body for that in that regard. So what we're saying is that the floor plans that we have, we designed to minimize any noise from the freeway in the outdoor living spaces of the homes. And we tried to accommodate that with courtyards and...
Wait a minute. This is a fairly simple question.
Got it.
I understood the Planning Commission to say that two different models is not enough diversity. So what I'm asking you is, we started the evening by saying, if we approve this project one way or the other tonight, how much leeway are we going to have with architectural site approval? I understood we'd have fairly broad leeway. On the other hand, if you don't understand that, then we have to clarify that, because I don't want you to come back and feel like you're being taken advantage of.
I'm not misunderstanding that. I know my client is not misunderstanding that either.
So if we went with 9, you understand that when you come back, we may want more than 2 models.
We want something significant in diversity.
Okay, just wanted to clear up.
I'm with you.
And let me ask you one more question, too. Essentially, we have 3 proposals before us, 9 and 2 10s.
That's correct.
If you were, well, in a sense you could be, would you recommend one over the other, and if so, why? Right? So you have your choice. You've got 3, 9 and 2 10s.
Well, I think I believe that the 9-lot proposal that we turned in is an appropriate use on the site. We think that the in lieu fees and not doing the BMP in an inclusive fashion offers monies that could be used in a more flexible manner than simply having a home that's constructed already. We have no objection to building a BMP or accommodating the BMP. That's not the issue. But we believe that we were following the guidance that we were originally given by the town, and that's how we pursued it. And so we believe that the 9-lot would be actually our first choice.
So having 2 flag lights doesn't bother you?
We don't have 2 flag lots on the 9 lot.
No, but I asked you of the 3 possibilities, did you have a preference? And what I've heard is a $15,000 discussion. I'm wondering if, for example, we picked A or B and you had 2 flag lots, does that bother you?
No, it does not, because I think that the entire site is on a private roadway. It's not on a public roadway in that regard, so I think it starts off in a different sense. Even though there might be a property line that has a narrowness to it at the street, that the frontage and the landscaping that's being applied to it is a more cohesive fashion under a planned development than it would be under individual homes with everyone planting exactly what they want to put on the site.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Erickson.
Thank you, Chair O'Donnell. So I have a follow-up question to the flag lot, corridor lot. The general plan of the town is very clear about discouraging corridor, otherwise more commonly known flag lots. And the general plan also lays out some information about when corridor lots should be considered. And let me read that to you. And what I want you to do is to respond to how, when you redid the subdivision in either A or B tonight, how you accommodated the conditions that are laid out in the general plan for considering a corridor lot. So when you read that to you, it says the corridor lots may only be considered if the use of a corridor lot decreases the amount of public street required for the subdivision, contributes to the surrounding neighborhood, and is in the context of the existing scale and established character of the neighborhood. The subdivider must also demonstrate that the use of a corridor lot benefits surrounding properties. So a consideration for us is how we need to understand how you are responding to those requirements.
Before you answer that question, I'd like to ask staff to comment, because we have an unusual circumstance here where the applicant comes in and says, I want to build 9 lots. We essentially say, no, build 10. And then we say, and oh, by the way, we want you to satisfy the general plan, even though that is not your proposal. So do we have any precedent? I think the question is a good one, but I just don't understand how you tell an applicant to do this, and then, oh, by the way, you also have to accommodate what the general plan would say.
Ask a question before you do that. I guess I didn't take the direction from the last meeting for the applicant to come back with a 10-lot subdivision. I took the direction to come up with a below-market price unit in the subdivision, which could be accomplished in other ways than subdividing into 10 lots.
He automatically gets the other lot when you do it below market.
I understand that, but one could hypothetically also accommodate including a BMP without going to 10 lots. Could do it on 9, could do it on 8, hypothetically.
Okay. Do you have any comments or not?
Well, in terms of flag lots, the flag lots have been approved on a case-by-case basis in the past.
And my question would be this. If we said to somebody, you must put in a BMP unit, but you may not take advantage of having an additional unit, do we have any authority for that?
You could recommend that the density be reduced.
Okay, and this, all right, fine, thank you. Are there other questions? Commissioner Seah.
I do have a question. You touched upon courtyard, the architecture utilizing the courtyard to mitigate noise.
Yes.
And you talked about that significantly at the last meeting. I'm looking at your layout, and I see only really 2 homes that utilize the courtyard. It's Lot 4 and Lot 8. And so is there a specific reason why those which are furthest from the freeway would utilize that, and why you wouldn't use it for the rest of the homes, which are even closer?
Well, we actually, if you look at lots 1, 2, and 1, 2, and 3, each one of those has a courtyard. It's on the side away from the freeway. That there is an interior surrounded patio area that serves as a courtyard. It's not as large as the other plan, but we have the 2 plans, and then we have 4 elevation variances of those 2 plans.
A follow-up then. So the reason only 4 and 8 are highlighted with courtyard is just because they're significantly larger than the other lots?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct. We were trying to delineate that a little bit more.
Okay, thank you.
I have to apologize. I cut off your answer to Commissioner Erickson, so please go ahead.
I wasn't going to let you get away with that. Okay. Well, one of the things is that there's a little bit of difference, I think, with the general plan. The general plan is referring to the ordinance where it refers to the flag lot issues is referring to off of a public street. And most flag lots have a corridor that runs back to it alongside a lot in front with a lot behind it. And these are not quite the same situation, because the way we have it is that we have streets on both sides. We also have a large opening. It flares in that regard. It's not a 20-foot access way that goes to the lot that's behind. We also have a public walkway that comes down alongside that. And so in the normal sense of a flag lot, it doesn't really function as a flag lot because more of that home is exposed to the front. You can see it from the street. Normal flag lots, you cannot see that house from the street in general.
Any follow-up?
So that's, I guess I would only ask, so you don't want to elaborate more to the question that was asked.
I thought, how does it comply with the ordinance is what you asked. Well,
Right. That's fine. If that's your answer, that's okay.
It can't meet any of those requirements because we're on a private street. It doesn't have any effect on a public street. So whatever I do to that lot does not alter a public street that abuts the site.
So then I guess I have a question for staff then. So then the part of the general plan that refers to corridor, or more commonly known flag lots, does not apply in this situation.
It does not differentiate between public or private streets.
So it does apply.
Okay. So what we've just heard from staff is that the differentiation saying it's a private street and therefore it doesn't apply is not staff's reading. So do you have any response to that?
Right, and I was answering Mr. Erickson's question, and he said a public street in his comments. And I thought that he was reading from the ordinance, which talks about a public street.
Could you read that again, Mr. Erickson?
Sure. It says, quarter lots may only be considered if the use of a quarter lot decreases the amount of public street required for the subdivision, 1, contributes to the surrounding neighborhood, 2, and 3 is in the context of the existing scale and established character of the neighborhood. The subdivider must also demonstrate that the use of the quarter lot benefits surrounding properties. So there's 5 different issues in there, only one of which refers to a public street.
I got you. What we've created is our own community at this point that's down the hill. It does not have the layout of these lots does not coordinate directly with a more conventional grid-style layout of lots which are on the street above. We could go to that kind of a layout, but I don't think that would be advisable or best way of utilizing the preservation of the hillside, for instance, that we're doing, and no building above the toe of the slope.
All right, thank you. Are there other questions? Commissioner Telesfor?
I have one that is sort of a follow-up to Commissioner Sayocs about the noise. I wanted to review again the measurement of the noise, of the sound levels, and I think we talked about it at the last previous meeting to this meeting.
Okay, I think I would like to have my consultant
Okay.
speak to that.
Why don't we
please.
get the question first, so I know what it is.
Okay, so the question is going to be, is I would just like to have a review of the measurement, what it resulted in, but I'd like to see where on the site the sound was measured. In other words, if we looked at the site layout and looked at the houses, which house did you measure it to? If you wouldn't mind helping me with that. Where were you standing, in other words? Which site?
Please introduce yourself and your address, please.
Good evening, Planning Commission. I'm Jeff Pack of Edward Pack Associates in San Jose. It was quite a long time ago that I was out on the site, but from the best of my recollection, I was fairly close to the freeway. I discussed the locations in my sound report, so let me just refresh my memory as to exactly where the location was. Made a location along the proposed sound wall location near the westerly property line and 112 feet from the center line of Highway 17. Because of the vegetation, the heavy vegetation right at the property line, I couldn't get really that close to it. I chained my sound meter to a tree that was at that location.
At 112. So can you?
From the center line of the freeway.
So where would it be on the site, approximately?
And it was probably somewhere right about in here.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions of Mr. Pack while he's there? Thank you very much. Are there other questions of the applicant? Seeing none, then I have a couple of cards here. Is it wrong? Please come forward. Yes, if you go to the podium.
Okay, good evening. My name is Yin Rong. I'm the resident of 16997 Frank Avenue, which is directly next to the, right here. I'm right here. So,
Could you show me again? I looked away. All right, thank you.
it's directly next to the property that will be built. And I have a couple of concerns as I just moving to this residence last year, so some of the concerns may or may not be discussed before, so please bear with me. The first one is the sound wall. I hope the new sound wall will improve the noise issue that we currently have, but I just have a slightest concern that as our house is right here, and our noise is majorly coming from this place, which is the closest to the highway. So I hope this part of sound wall will not amplify the noise to our house, because our house is a few, maybe 100 feet above the highway. So the height of the sound wall definitely will not protect us. So I hope it will improve this noise issue, not just degrade it. This is my first concern. The second concern is there always will be a wall built between my property and this property. And after the wall has been built, this part of my property will not be accessible because it's the downhill. And there will be situations that we need to access. Currently, we can access from here, but after the wall has been built.
No, let me stop you for 1 second. You don't presently have an easement, do you? Across the other property?
No, we can't actually walk here.
You may be able to walk there, but do you have an easement?
No.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So there may be situations like a fire situation or something like that. So I'm worried about this. This is my second concern. The third one is the realignment of the street. And I believe this part needs a lot of landfills or earth movements. I worry about if the effect of this will have a good or bad effect to my geological situation, because currently we have some cracks still left from the last earthquake, and this is awfully close to my house. So,
have you found anything in the record that suggests there's going to be a lot of earth movement there, or changes there? Or?
I currently have no evidence of that.
It's a question.
It's just a question. It's just my concern. Hopefully somebody can study this for us. And that's all. Thank you.
Now let's see if the commissioners have any questions of you. Any questions? Commissioner Erickson.
Other than the movement of the potential movement of the land and so forth, do you have other concerns about the way the street will enter into either Plaza Rosa or
actually, yes. But
Frank Avenue, depending on how you...
I think it has been discussed before, because I have 2 kids, and one of them bike to school, one of them walk to school. So this is the way that they walk and bike. So obviously I worry about that, but I don't think I can do anything about that.
Let me try my question again. I apologize for not making it clear. So in the earlier plan, the street was at a different angle, so they've adjusted the entry point of the street coming out of the subdivision. So they've changed that position of that. So does that entry point is closer to your property than it was before. So does that present concern for you?
There's another concern that is currently we have a hydrant here, so there's a fire lane right in front of my door. So I have limited parking space here. As this street moved closer to mine, I have even smaller parking space for me. This is my only concern. So.
Okay, so let me follow up too. As I understand the location of your house, you are up the hill.
Yes.
On Frank Avenue. Okay.
Correct. And from this point to my house, there's I don't know, maybe 100 feet. Slow.
All right. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Mort Schuring?
My name is Mort Sharon. I live at 16996 Frank Avenue. And we're right at the corner there. And I was the neighbor that was very concerned about the alignment of the roadway. And now with the relocation, I find that much more acceptable. And I'm willing to go with that. I would also like to be sure that we still have the option of the screening that was proposed at the last meeting be included in the proposal to approve this project. We haven't decided if that's really going to be effective or not, but all it really included was a little fence at our dining room window.
We'll certainly allow the applicant to respond to that.
And my other concern was the amount of parking, common area parking spaces in the project. I know they show 47 parking places, including the driveways and the garages, but I'm not 100% certain that that would be enough to handle weekend partying and events such as that. So we're trying to keep all the cars down in that residential area, not on Frank and Placer Oaks. So,
Are there any questions of the speaker? Thank you very much. I have one more, I think only one more. Lee Quintana.
Lee Quintana, 5 Palm Avenue. I have a couple of areas where I'd like to make some comments and ask you to give some consideration. First is the conformance of the project with the general plan housing element. I understand the housing element, revised housing element, has not been adopted yet. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. The project as proposed per the staff report is not consistent with the current housing element. And I believe that's one of the findings that is necessary to be made, that it's consistent, that the project is consistent with the general plan. Seems like this project is maybe premature and should be tabled until after the new project housing element is approved. Other thing I'd like to mention is that at the top...
Why that is?
Excuse me?
Could you tell us why that is?
Why what is?
Why? You gave us a conclusion. I'm wondering if you give us a reason.
Okay, but you're taking... can I have some extra time then?
No, don't answer the question if you want to. Go right ahead. Go ahead. It's your 3 minutes.
It's my 3 minutes, which you just used a lot of up. Okay.
30 seconds. How's that? Go ahead.
At the time the original, the current PD and ANS were approved, there was not the knowledge that the site had potential geologic hazards from liquefaction and lateral spreading. No discussion of that was contained in the staff report, and very little in the initial study. One would have to go to read the actual geotechnical report to find out that information. The mitigation has implications potentially for vegetation, tree. In addition, the current project impacts more trees than the current approved project, and the noise impacts of this project are the prime impact on trees. Of the 95 surveyed trees, more than 50% are impacted directly by removal or severely impacted by the project itself. A large number of those are rated as being high to moderate significance for retention. Most of those impacts are from the development of sound wall mitigation. The sound wall, there's a lot of confusion about the sound mitigation. The sound mitigation is the height of the wall, but in order to get the height of that wall above the elevation of the pad, you have to add the berm, which ranges from various sizes. Do I have extra time? Because
You have your 30 seconds. Go ahead.
Because you have to build up that berm from the base elevation that the wall is going at. I mean, here's the level of the pad, here's the level of wherever the wall is going to go. You have to build the berm up to meet that. This is all part of the noise mitigation as well as the retaining wall for that berm. Also noise. The reflection from the 13-foot wall, retaining walls for the driveway have not been analyzed as far as I can see. I did get a statement from Mr. Pack that the reflection would not be significant, but how does it add to the measures that have already been done? And noise increases as you go up, and the measurements for the exterior noise for the development were taken at the base of the toe of the slope, not at the second story. How does that affect it? In other words, if you take the measured noise at the toe, the reflected noise from the roadway, and the elevated height of the windows on the second floor. How does that all relate to the total noise? I have lots of other things I could talk about, but I'll conclude by saying that while the density has been reduced about 75%, the intensity of the square footage development above ground has only been reduced about 35 to 37%, and other measures of intensity such as circulation and parking coverage, the coverage of the buildings themselves, permeability, and a whole slew of other things have been changed only by a very minor degree, between 2 and 5%, either plus or minus. So the intensity of the change project hasn't been reduced that greatly. Okay, thank you.
Are there questions of the speaker? Mr. Griffin?
Thank you. The area that I believe it was Mr. Wong that spoke first was concerned about the grading and causing an issue with endangering his home. And this area, from about this point to the street, this is the levelest part and of all of this area here. That slope actually begins at this point down on the roadway, plus on this area in here. We are actually moving the roadway over onto what is currently a fairly light slope. It's not the steep slope on the rest of the site. And it's about 10 foot that we're moving the entrance over. And when we get back to here, nothing is moving, because basically what we did is the road had a bend in it and we straightened it out to accommodate that. I'm not sure how to deal with access to his rear yard, and because these are would-be private yards, and he has a private yard as well. We have proposed to Mr. Sharon a screen option that we will still abide by, and that would still be something, if he feels it's necessary, we are willing to install. The issues, I'm going to cover one of the issues that was raised about the liquefaction potential in that area there. The original report, which was done by geoforensics, identified the potential for that when it was given to the town's geological consultant. That consultant thought that it was overstated in the original report and actually asked for a further reporting, which turned out to be true, that it was less. And if we were to do more reporting, it could even be proven that there is no liquefaction of subject on the site at all. So we have already had adopted an agreement for mitigation of any potential in that regard, with a grout wall that would be installed at the base of the hill, and that would mitigate any of the issues that potentially might be there. And with regard to the sound, I'm going to ask for Jeff Pack to address whether the sound would be amplified from that lower wall, as Mr. Wong indicated, and also with regard to how the noise reflection would be measured as it rises up the hill and for the second story.
Mr. Griffin, just for the record, it is not Wong. It's Wrong, I believe, R-O-N-G.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Pack?
Thank you.
Good evening, Jeff Pack again. To address Mr. Wong's concern about reflections off the corner of the sound wall, he's so high up on the hill, and in relation to where he is, that portion of the sound wall is so small. It's only 8 or 9, 10 feet tall, and that corner, sound reflecting off of that wall is just basically going to go into the hillside, and that reflective component also is very, very small. We're only talking maybe a decibel, which is not noticeable. So there's no concern there at all. With Ms. Quintana's concerns about reflections off the retaining wall, again, by the time the sound comes off the freeway and it goes over the sound wall, goes over the houses and hits a retaining wall up in this area, it loses quite a bit of acoustic energy as it travels that distance. If it was just a perfectly reflective barrier in a perfect laboratory type situation, the increase in sound would be 3 decibels. It can't physically be any more than that. In reality, it's more in the range of 1 decibel, maybe slightly higher than 1 decibel of reflection back in this area. Again, that's not a significant increase. It's not even detectable by the ear unless you're in a laboratory situation. So again, that's not a concern either. Sound reflections off the sound wall going back towards the Vasona or back into the homes here is very, very minor. It does occur, but it's not noticeable. So it's not something to be concerned with.
Mr. Telesfor?
Can you review with, or remind me what exactly you measured as far as dBAs?
The day-night level, the 24-hour average, which is used by the general plan, is 76 dB. Okay, at the nearest building setback or any of the rear yards, particularly at the home that's in the corner closest to the sound wall. So the sound level is about 76 dB on the outside.
76
Yes.
dB. So if you added the +3,
No, it wouldn't be +3. That would be in a perfect situation where you have perfectly reflective barriers and nothing else, and that's not the case here. These walls are not perfectly sound reflective. Okay, they do have some absorptive characteristics to them, so they don't reflect much more than the natural earth out there. So the reflective component would only add maybe a decibel, plus or minus a fraction, which would not be noticeable. And in the day-to-day, every day-to-day, it's, plus or minus a dB and a half out there. On one day it could be 74, another day it could be 77. Typically it's 76. And you can't tell the difference between one day to the next if it's 75 or 76 or 77. You don't notice that difference on a day-to-day basis.
Are there other questions of either Mr. Pack or Mr. Griffin? Thank you very much. Mr. Griffin, you wanted to finish.
I'm sorry, there was one more comment that was made about that there are more trees that are affected by this project than the previously approved project. And there is a simple answer to that, and it was because the first tree report, the study that we did for the previous apartments, was done 10 years ago. And in that intervening 10 years, just like the planting along the freeway, those trees have grown too, that many of the trees that are now in the report were not of size to be in the report at that time.
Any questions on that point? Thank you very much. We've now heard all of the public comments, so I think I will close the public hearing and ask for comments or questions. Before we do that, I have a question of you, of the staff. One comment was that this project does not comply with the general plan as it presently exists, and I tried to find out why not, and I still don't know why not. Do you happen to know why not?
I would think where Ms. Quintana was coming from was in regards to the housing inventory, that this lot, the apartment project was included in the housing counts. So that's in the current housing element. With the upcoming housing element, due to the non-agreements between the other two property owners, we realized this project, the apartment project, would not happen. So that site has been taken out of the housing inventory count.
Okay, but the point there was that new housing element has not yet been adopted.
That's correct.
But I guess the other point is that you can include it in the housing element if you want, but it's physically impossible because of the other owners not cooperating.
That's correct.
Ms. Sack, did you have a question?
Actually, that was my question.
Okay. Ms. Telesfor?
Yeah, I have a question of staff related to the DBAs. What's acceptable levels in town or for developments?
I believe it's 55 or 65. I'd have to refer to.
I recollect it being 55 in the general plan. Is that so?
Correct.
That would be okay.
Since the town attorney just returned, I'm curious, I want to ask you this question. Originally, the proposed number of homes was 9. We then asked for a below market, so they came back with 10, which would be the normal procedure. It's been pointed out, however, that we could say, no, it's too dense, and therefore you ought to have 7 homes, for example. If we were to say that, they would still be entitled to 1 additional unit. Is that correct?
Yes.
So in setting the density, I take it we are not supposed to take into consideration the below-market unit.
That's correct. The zoning code provides certain density limits, and you can augment that density allowed by the addition of the BMP unit, or units, depending on the size of the project.
It struck me if what you want to do is wind up where you would have been if you didn't have a below-market unit, and therefore you reduce the density, for example, to 8, and say, oh, good, now you can have 9. That is not the spirit, I take it, of the below-market incentive. Do you understand it?
Well, I don't want to treat that as a question. What I do want to say is that the purpose of the incentive is to ensure that the unit is constructed, and as an additional incentive to do so, you can, as a proponent of a project, get a density above and beyond what would otherwise be permitted, but it's only for the affordable unit.
So if we were to determine that the density independent of this unit is 9, it's 9. If it were independent of this unit 8, it would be 8. But we can't make the density determination because we know there's going to be a bonus because of the BMP.
I think that you're properly interpreting the spirit of the town zoning code with regard to affordable housing.
Thank you. Other questions? How about a discussion, because there's a lot of stuff before us on this. Commissioner Jensen.
Okay, I have comments in 3 areas. The first is with respect to the general plan, flag lots, and BMP units. I don't know that I see anything that said we demanded a BMP unit. I think that a BMP unit might have been offered in thinking that perhaps the Fiesta Way house would go there. We can't consider that, so there's nothing about that that should be in our consideration. And it seems to me, and I'm doing my comments, and it seems to me that if it were true that we asked for a BMP unit, that doesn't mean we asked for a flag lot. And I disagree with Mr. Griffin that if you have a planned development that results in a private road, that essentially, as I understood your statement, you get to ignore rules about flag lots, and that's poor planning, and we shouldn't consider that kind of thing. And the reason we have general plan and planning measures is that everyone complies with it, and we don't have an independent island in the town of Los Gatos that has different rules. So if there is a flag lot, I think that we get to consider that. So that's item number 1. Item number 2 is I don't believe that there's been any architectural diversity whatsoever shown in the plan. And I'm troubled by that, and I'm troubled by the notion that that's going to be taken care of later in architecture and site. My third comment is, and I know that this is something that I've said before, and Mr. Korb, I know what the policy is, but I'm going to ask that the town council consider, or someone consider, whether a nexus ought to be required for community benefit. Because it strikes me, as I said in a different project, that contributing $15,000 for traffic calming that's going to be used in a neighborhood that's not yours, it shouldn't, in my mind, be considered to be a community benefit when what you're doing is trying to address an impact of a development in a particular place. So at least to my mind, I hope that we can discuss whether there should be a nexus between community benefit and a project. So I have several concerns about this project.
Are there other comments? Commissioner Telesport?
Yeah, before I get swept up into architecture or tied of other reports or alternative plans, after hearing the testimony tonight and taking a review of the testimony in the previous meeting, I'm still not convinced that this is even where you'd want to put single-family homes. My issues are with sound and with noise from the freeway. My issues are with air quality from those emissions of those vehicles. And I think my concerns are supported by the testimony of Jeff Pack in the previous meeting, and he testified tonight, but not to this. He said, before I say that, tonight he testified that the level of DBAs was at 76 DBAs, and the town in the general plan is at is at 55 as their maximum. You know, that would be, they're trying to keep it at 55. Now, sometimes it goes a little beyond that, but 76 to me is almost another quarter. We're almost to 100. So, but what he said at the last meeting was this. He said, he testified that the sound, and this is a quote, the sound wall is designed to mitigate for the ground floor elevation. And he recommended that highly sound-rated windows on the second floor be kept closed to keep the sound out. And I really wondered, is that how we control, you know, toxic air emissions? And is that how we control the elevation of sound? So before I do any more opinions of what I've evaluated here, I'd like to hear from my other commissioners. But that's where my concerns are, and I'm not at this point in support of this project.
Other comments? Commissioner Erickson?
Yeah, I guess I still have a concern about whether or not, independent of whether I can add a 10th lot, let's assume I can add a 10th lot to accommodate the BMP, it doesn't necessarily mean that I have to leave the 8 original lots the same size. So I could have 10 lots in the subdivision. So even if I'm not increasing density by adding that 10th lot, does not necessarily lead me to the conclusion that the only solution to that is a flag lot or a corridor lot. And I don't believe that the general conditions that are in general plan that are laid out have been addressed adequately in this when one is supposed to consider a quarter lot. So it seems like to me I would have a concern with the quarter lot being in the project.
Other comments? Commissioner Sayak?
The comments that I have are quite similar to what you've heard already. But again, the discussion of just the plan development and just a reminder that plan development, although you can say it just overrides what is there, in essence, we do ask that you just enhance the requirements of the underlying zone. And so the discussion that we've heard, like the flag lots and the other requirements that we would ask of residential areas, are things that at least I for myself would want in a plan development also. And you just happen to be enhancing with all these other things that you have. With BMP specifically, the direction that I heard and that I gave last was that we would like BMP actually built on site. Prior to the meeting that we provided that direction, we had a discussion with regards to upcoming BMPs, and that was something that at least the Planning Commission had consensus on, was that on-site development was much preferred over in lieu fees. And so following that discussion, that was the direction that we provided. Not giving you specific directions of how to do it, giving you that discretion, but that was just definitely what I wanted. Going back to the noise attenuation and mitigation, the second story discussion that was heard at the last meeting that Commissioner Talasfori reminded me of, I still don't believe that housing that encourages people to keep their windows closed at all times is necessarily housing that we ought to encourage. Now, that being said, I understand people buy what they want to buy, but perhaps when you go back and look at a redevelopment or just changing this, a redesign, is there any consideration to having, I guess, larger one-story homes so that you don't have that second-story issue of having to keep your windows constantly closed? Something to think about, especially as you're going back and just looking at a lot of the other comments that you're hearing tonight. That's something that just occurred to me tonight, and maybe that's something that you may have already given some thought to, but definitely I'd like to hear more discussion about next time.
Commissioner Bourgeois?
Thank you. I actually have a question for staff. So I'm concerned about this noise issue, and I hear my fellow commissioners' concerns, and it almost seemed like it was leaning toward is this even an appropriate site to put residential homes because of the noise? I'm just wondering, the fact that there's already an ordinance, it's zoned for residential, has that decision already been made? And what's our discretion on that point, or should we, is that a moot point at this point?
Well, I'll try to answer the question. Obviously, the site is zoned for residential, so that decision has been made, at least with regard to the existing zoning. Anybody can make an application consistent with the existing zoning and consistent with our architectural and site rules and subdivision rules, and should be able to ultimately get it approved. So I don't think it's appropriate at this point in time to say you can't build any residential housing here. Now, that said, this is a PD application. A PD application is a separate legislative decision, and just because it has separately been determined that this is zoned for residential doesn't mean you have to approve this particular project in this particular configuration. That's a highly discretionary decision given the fact that it's a legislative decision as opposed to a decision that is based on an application consistent with the existing zoning.
Let me say something first, because I have not said anything yet, and I'm going to say something I think which is significantly different than what I have been hearing. This property is zoned for much higher density. They're proposing to have much lower density. I hear a lot of let's redesign it conversations, which we had the last time. And when I hear when you come back next time, there's no reason to believe they are going to come back next time, because they have, I believe, the right to appeal, should we decide against them. The noise is unfortunate. This whole piece of property is unfortunate. On the other hand, short of buying it for a park, it can be developed, apparently, for residences. So then the question becomes, what do we do about it? To the extent that we don't like flag lots, one solution is not to require a BMP unit on the property. You just got rid of 2 flag lots. There was a strong statement last time that I didn't join it, I didn't quarrel with it, that it would be good if we put a BMP unit on site. And I think as a general rule, that is a good idea. On the other hand, when I look at this development and I see those 2 flag lots, I don't like those 2 flag lots. I don't think the reason we have a policy against flag lots is a good reason. And the question then becomes, if we put a BMP in it, Commissioner Erickson's right, you could keep designing this thing. These people have 2 alternatives. It is possible that somebody could come up with a different plan. All kinds of things are possible. But I don't know that our job is to keep sending something back or to redesign it. I think that the density of 9 is a reasonable density. I think the 1 additional unit occurs because we want one on site. And the way to get rid of the 2 flag lights is to say, fine, don't build a BMP unit on site. Do what everybody else does. Contribute to that fund. They can do that. You've got that alternative. If we have some specific conditions we'd like to make of this project, we could do that. But what I'm hearing now is I don't like the way it's designed. And I don't know that that's very helpful. And I do think, as the town attorney said, I think under the present circumstances, they have a right to build residences. I would much prefer 9 residences than 37 or whatever it was originally set for. I wouldn't want to buy a unit down there, and in a perfect world, I wouldn't want to have one built down there, but we don't live in a perfect world. I think they have a right to build down there. If we have some concrete suggestions on conditions, I think we ought to give them. That being said, obviously, the commission can turn this down, and it sounds like they may. Commissioner Telesford.
I believe this is a recommendation to town council, correct?
Ultimately, yes, that's what your decision would be.
That's okay. So in that recommendation, there could be, commissioners, that the town council take another look at perhaps redesignating this. I mean, there's lots of reasons. Adjacent neighborhood that's already there. There's, office buildings and things. We could recommend that the town council perhaps take a look at redesignating this. I mean, that could be something that we could do, I would think. Is that right? That could be a recommendation? Am I wrong?
Well, yeah, you could make a recommendation that the area be rezoned for a different purpose, sure.
I mean, I think that...
Can't guarantee how the council is going to...
Right, I understand that. And I frankly think that there might be merit with what was originally zoned, in the fact that when you have single-family homes, those homes, you know, you're thinking that someone's going to be buying a 30-year mortgage and raising a family there. And I think that what we've learned in 50 years, when this was first approved, or this was approved in the 60s or so, when was it first designated for this
You mean the PD?
apartment? Yeah.
That was about 10 years ago.
Oh, 10 years ago, okay. But I think we've become a little more astute at, you know, how sound affects neighborhoods and people and things. My point is that when I think of this as a family development, I get nervous because I can't imagine someone living in that that environment. When I think of it as developing apartments, I mean, those are usually short-term kind of residence, you know, for a few years, not for a 30-year. I just, for quality of life for the residents of our town, our general plan talks about development that enhances our town. I just can't support it for those reasons. So I don't know, could I hear from somebody else? Maybe I'm out of the ballpark, but I think the apartments that were approved are what I would probably go with.
Mr. Erickson?
I guess I would be, it seems like to me the property has been zoned for residential use, and that I think I would respect the property owner's assessment of whether the market would bear changing from the high density that is to medium or low density, the change from rental. That seems to me is a market decision in part. And it's not changing the fundamental use of the property from residential to commercial or something. It's only addressing density. So that part of it I would be supportive of. It seems like they have responsibly responded to relocating the road. I would be comfortable with, if we were going to move forward with it, all other issues being addressed, that the architectural diversity question was addressed at the next stage of it. And I can't imagine that they haven't gotten a pretty clear message that there would be an expectation that there be architectural diversity. It seems like to me they've also, to the extent that I understand in respect to the people who have greater expertise than I have with it, that they've responsibly addressed, to the extent that's possible, attenuating the sound impact in that area. I guess where I still have a concern is I don't necessarily think that they've addressed, the only solution doesn't seem like to me to incorporating a BMP lot and isn't a justification that's provided for in the general plan to incorporate a flag lot. So I could accomplish that in another way, I guess. And I'm not suggesting they need to redesign, but there are also some considerations in the general plan where we should approve flag lots, and one of them is not to accommodate a BPM lot, a BPM unit.
Yes, Commissioner Bourgeois?
I'm going to go ahead and try a motion, see if we can get this rolling. Just a comment first. I agree. I would prefer high-density use on the site, but I think when the access changed, the impacts to the neighborhood have kind of taken that off the table. I like, of the options that we've been presented, I like the 10-lot option, and I like alternative B. So I'm going to recommend that we continue the matter to the meeting of January 13th to further develop alternative B with the following direction. One, obviously it's a 10-lot subdivision, so you retain the BMP unit. We significantly increase the architectural diversity. Consider slightly reducing the intensity and size of a couple of the designs because we only have one flag lot on this. Is that correct? It's only one flag lot. I think with a little creativity and maybe a little bit reduction in a couple of the house sizes, you can get those lots to not be a flag lot. So that would be my motion, and that would be the direction I'd want to take.
Is there a second? Commissioner Sapp?
I'll second the motion.
All right, is there discussion? Commissioner Erickson?
Could I ask Commissioner Bourgeois, help me understand what your intent is with the part about the architectural diversity?
Great. So if you look at I think hopefully staff heard our concern loud and clear, and we'll come back with conditions that are clear. To be more explicit, the condition that they have proposed in our staff report says plans are conceptual in nature such that minor deviations may be approved for architecture and site approval. I don't like that language. Okay. I think it's going to be more than minor revisions. I think we want to see more than 2 styles of home, maybe some diversity in size and story. So here's the revised language that they're giving me. The official development plans are conceptual in nature, and deviations will be approved through the architecture and site approval process to achieve architectural excellence.
Will be required?
Will be approved through. So anyway, this is just draft language. I think.
If I may, I don't want to disrupt you, but just to point out, let us work on that language. I think we have the gist of your concern. I, again, wanted to reiterate very strongly that nothing in the PD should in any way dictate the architecture of the project, and eliminate in any way your discretion to evaluate the architecture for any of the parcels as they come through the architecture and site process, including all of the parcels. So if you wanted to say down the line, we need to see more diversity between all of the parcels, you should be able to do that. This language shouldn't restrict that. However, one thing that particular language was originally intended to address was the fact that the PD is the PD and it has to be approved at the PD level. We wanted to ensure that certain minor deviations with regard to, where the edge of a road may be or something else, as the details of the project are engineered, which usually happens at that ANS level, can be accommodated, but we didn't want to allow for wholesale changes in the PD because, again, this is an ordinance, and you don't change an ordinance by resolution. You don't do it by a lesser process. So we do need to work on that language, but we have the gist of your concern, and it goes to the architecture.
Let me ask a question of the maker of the motion. If the applicant comes back, has 10 lots, follows alternative B, but still has a flag lot, what are we telling them? I know we've told them, we sure hope you don't. We sure hope you can figure out some other way to do it. None of us sitting here at the moment have suggested how they do it, which is good, because that's not our job. But let's assume they come back and say, we've turned it every way and it just doesn't work out. So here it is, but we still have a flag lot. I think we should be clear tonight, because if we're saying you can come back, we want the stuff you've said, which is fine, but we're not going to approve this if you've got a flag lot, and if that's your feeling, then I think it would be very helpful to make that message clear. If you're not saying that, you're saying, well, how do I know? I haven't seen what you've done yet. That's fine too, but I just kind of like to know what the maker of the motion's intention is.
Yeah, I'm not saying that if there's a flag lot, I won't vote for it. But we've heard staff's offered a suggestion as to how that could be eliminated. I think we need to see strong justification as to why it couldn't be accomplished. That's what I'd be looking for.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jensen.
As I understand the motion, the opposite is true. We're not saying we are going to vote for it if you come back with a flag lot. We're saying please come up with a solution for alternative B, given the studies that are contained in the staff report, and hopefully you'll be very creative about it. Is that my understanding? And you have no guarantee one way or the other. Okay.
That's Commissioner Erickson.
I guess I would think about it this way: if they came back with a development that had a flag lot in it, that they would need to address the section of the general plan that says flag lot should be considered in these circumstances. And to the extent that they adequately addressed that and then I would be satisfied, because we would then have a basis upon which to, consistent with the general plan, to approve a subdivision with a corridor or flag lot in it.
Let me ask you a question on that. There are 4 requirements on that. One related to public streets, which apparently is not applicable here. And I don't remember, I guess what I'm asking you is, you've read it, you've got it in front of you. Is it possible that they can satisfy those 4 requirements in your mind? Because when you read them, it wasn't clear to me whether that had been drafted with this situation in mind.
I think I could write the justification for them. So, but I don't think that's our role. That's their role to do.
No, I wasn't. I just wanted to know if you thought it was possible. Okay. Okay. I will. Let me say this: that I don't like the flag lot here, and I would much prefer to see it come back without a flag lot. And as everybody has said, we're not saying exactly what we will do, but I think in good faith, if they came back with diversity and without a flag lot, it sounds like they'd be pretty much have met what we're asking for. I don't want people to go off on a chase and come back and find out that the rules, that our feelings have changed. And I only say that in tension. We're not, we got to look at it when it comes in. So I can support the motion as it's made. Commissioner Jensen?
With all due respect to the chair, I have to say that I don't feel there's been consensus reached, and I'm not comfortable with whatever they're going to come in with, and we'll consider it when they present it. At least that's my position. I'm not taking a position. So as I understand what you're saying, it's like, if you do X, Y, Z, we'll approve you. I, as a commissioner, am not ready to say that. So my vote for the motion will not indicate that.
Thank you. Believe me, I never speak for you. And when I say the commission, I normally mean the majority, and I often don't include you in that. So thank you for the advice, however. Okay. Anybody else want to discharge something from their feelings? Okay. Can we have a vote on the motion then? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
So all the votes are in favor. One person is. Oh, I'm sorry. We have. I didn't get to know.
Yes.
All those opposed. So it is what? 5-1. 5-1.
Commissioner tells for no. Those following the issue, the public hearing on this matter has been continued to January 13. There will be no additional notice. Please keep that in mind and inform your friends if they're interested.
And is there anything from the staff?
Just like to let you know, on November 2nd, the Town Council upheld the decision of the Planning Commission in denying a 3-lot subdivision and the demolition of a single-family residence at 15928 Union Avenue.
And I think for those of you who watched the council, you'll recall that they upheld our action but not our reasons. So that should be instructive. Okay. Are there any comments from the commission? There being none, the meeting is adjourned.